Attacks in southern and northern Serbia, including Kopriva, where it's claimed these pictures were shot. At the beginning of the third week of airstrikes, NATO leaders are meeting to discuss strategy. The US Defence Secretary William Cohen will meet his British, French and German counterparts in Germany to talk tactics. The NATO spokesman in Brussels, Jamie Shea, insists the alliance is not faltering in its resolve. The capital of Kosovo since the forced evacuation of Kosovan Albanians from the area. Aside from showing damage to civilian targets, the images also appear to show a largely empty city. The city was once home to 250,000 people, but foreign journalists who've been allowed to visit Pristina report that it's now mostly deserted. The acting president of Cyprus is due to fly to Belgrade today to try to secure the release of 3 captured American soldiers. The government of Cyprus says Spyros Kyprianou is acting on his own initiative and has no other agenda than the return of the soldiers. The Serb authorities say they arrested the men on Yugoslav territory. NATO insists the soldiers were non-combat troops on a routine patrol. Aid workers are still trying to locate thousands of the Kosovo Albanian refugees evacuated from a camp in Macedonia on Tuesday night. Of about 35,000 people moved on, 10,000 are thought to be in Albania, 4,000 in Greece and others elsewhere in Macedonia. The aid workers have criticised the evacuation, saying the refugees were not consulted and that many families have been divided.
Many were ordered out of their homes in Kosovo, marched to Macedonia, and now find themselves dumped at a sports stadium in Albania.
I was studying in Pristina and the policeman came to our house and said, get out from Pristina and go to Macedonia. When we go to Macedonia, here we stay a week, and they say, go to Albania, they are your people and don't stay here anymore.
At least 6,000 of the 30,000 who went missing from the Kosovo border have arrived here, a further problem for the already overstretched Albanian relief.
Innocent civilians, women, children being brutally forced from their homes and their country and pushed at gunpoint onto trains to heaven knows where. It's chilling for people in Israel. But my point is, why aren't more countries, which we could call part of the free world, taking part in both the military effort to stop him, to stop Milosevic, and in a humanitarian effort to look after those people who have been displaced, because I see it as a very evil man, and the only way you can stop him is with force.
What countries are you thinking about?
Well, I don't want to name names on the air. It's not fair to other countries, but there are certainly people who, certainly other countries in Europe and not too far away, that don't seem to be doing anything.
I saw an 11, 12-year-old boy, and they were talking about his mother walking down the stairs with his sister in her arms, and they shot her in the head. Now, what sort of Yugoslav does that, like cow? That's just cowardice, shooting a woman like that. And then when the father tried to grab the baby, they shot the father. That was in front of a 12-year-old kid. They're just, if you don't go in and get these people, you're going to have more trouble in the area.
How is this going to end, do you think?
Pardon?
How do you think this is going to end, then?
Well, thank goodness the Americans, the English, Australians, Canadians and everybody else, fair people. They've got to go in there, they've got to get this arsehole and get rid of him.
Okay, thank you very much for your call,
He's going to kill more people. I'm so upset over this. He's going to kill more people like he did in Bosnia. Next it will be Montenegro. Next it will be all that area around there if they don't go and get him.
Okay, so you're worried about the conflict escalating. Thank you very much for your call. We're going to go to Carol now in Leeds. Carol, how do you think this conflict might end?
The only way this conflict is going to end is if we go in there and we get him out. And he stands trial for everything that he's doing. I am the mother of a Serbian soldier. I do not want our boys and our girls and the Americans and everybody else to keep having to go in there year after year after year like we are having to do about Saddam. Why do we keep shooting the messenger? Let's get him.
Okay, Carol, thank you very much for your call. Well, let's put some of those points from our callers to our guest today, Geoffrey Stern from the London School of Economics. Geoffrey, one of the points, I think, from one of our callers in Australia was asking why aren't more countries involved in this conflict, in this dispute, and I suppose in the humanitarian effort?
Well, you'll find from previous conflicts that what happens in war is that as many countries as possible try to keep out of it. I mean, countries really don't like getting involved in war. And this is a rather unusual war because I suppose, if one's quite frank about it, it's a very unusual war because it's being fought, and I think this is true, for humanitarian reasons. Well, normally wars are fought for reasons of balance of power. Now, balance of power isn't involved here. It is a question of a humanitarian effort, and I think a lot of countries don't understand that. They want to keep out of it. But it's one thing to keep out of a military conflict, but it's another thing to refuse to give humanitarian assistance. And your Australian caller asked why there isn't more humanitarian assistance.
My point of view is like this. I think so that NATO should continue with the attacks for next, I think so, for next 3 to 4 weeks. They're going to achieve what they're thinking, and after that they're going to have a clear terrain to put the ground troops on a Kosovo.
Okay, well, let's put those points finally to Jeffrey Stern from the London School of Economics. Jeffrey, many callers seem to be suggesting possibly bomb for another 2 to 3 weeks and then go in with the ground troops.
Well, I certainly think bombing for another 2 or 3 weeks, yes. The problem with ground troops has already been discussed. The question as to how you get them there, the Greeks would have to agree, the Macedonians would have to agree, and it's by no means clear that they would. The alternatives to get the troops through Albania is not much an alternative, because if you know Albania as well as I do, you know that the roads are not suitable for this kind of thing. Either we would have to tremendously alter the country's infrastructure and do it in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, or it is a non-starter. So I think we have problems. On the other hand, where there's a will, there's a way. And if we felt that the only way of bringing this to an end would be through ground troops, I think we would find a way of perhaps airlifting troops there, but we would have to make sure that there isn't going to be much in the way of retaliation, and that means maintaining the bombardment so that we hit the army, we hit the installations, we hit all those bases from which retaliation can come.
Jeffrey Stern from the London.
15,000 refugees came here last night.
Aid workers in Macedonia are struggling to trace thousands of Kosovo Albanian refugees forcibly removed on Tuesday night by the Macedonian authorities. Most of the 30,000 people removed in a single night from Blace have now been traced to Albania, but around 10,000 are still missing. And on the 15th day of NATO's bombing campaign against Yugoslavia, Belgrade takes the heaviest hits yet.
And one other news story.
Welcome to this World Today special on the crisis in Kosovo. I'm Stephen Cole. NATO forces have started a third week of air raids against Yugoslavia with another strike at the heart of the capital, Belgrade. At least one building was hit. Attacks were also reported in southern and northern Serbia, with fuel depots among the targets. But NATO says that despite continued intensive bombardment, Serb forces show no sign of withdrawing from Kosovo. Well, in Washington, Pentagon officials said the latest wave of airstrikes focused on police and army units scattered in rural areas of Kosovo. In Brussels, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea said NATO was deeply preoccupied by reports of atrocities being committed against civilians. He said 50 villages have reportedly been burnt in the last few days. Meanwhile, aid workers in Macedonia are still trying to find out what happened to the thousands of Kosovo Albanians who went missing from the border area on Tuesday night. A day and a half after Macedonian security forces cleared out the squalid transit camp here at Blace, there's still great confusion just where exactly are the 27,000 to 30,000 or so Kosovo Albanian refugees. The Macedonian authorities say 10,000 were taken across the border into Albania. About 7,000 of them are being held in a sports stadium at Kochi in the south of the country. 10,000 or more have now turned up at a number of NATO-run camps further inside Macedonia. and most of these are at Brazda, just north of the capital Skopje. Well, yesterday the UNHCR in Greece reported that 25 busloads, a total of 2,000 or more, had been turned back at the Greek border. These may then have gone on to Albania. Neither NATO nor the humanitarian agencies had access to register the refugees while they were still at Blace, which is why they are now finding it so difficult to find out the exact numbers of those missing. But what is clear is that many of the refugees were evacuated against their will and that many families have been split up. As Janet Barrier reports, the stories of... Let's read what I've some quotes, some relevant quotes this morning from the Macedonian government official who's anonymously quoted as saying, "You complained when we didn't move the refugees quickly enough, and now you criticize us when we do empty that camp." This was the right thing to do. This is another quotation. Albania is their native land and it should accept the refugees, and the international community should help to get them there. That's from Macedonian President Kiro Gligorov. Now let's go to this report.
Back in Albania, American troops are being flown in to help with the influx of refugees. Around 400 arrived in the Albanian capital, Tirana. Meanwhile, the chief of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees arrived to inspect the relief operation.
My mission is here, really to visit with the government and then also see how our own colleagues have started really the work. I think everything is getting into place and I want to see how it's working.
The UNHCR has already admitted that the crisis has caught them off guard. The fact that so many refugees have found themselves moved by Macedonian buses has only added to the problems. David Silato, BBC News.
Well, as reports continue to emerge of alleged atrocities committed by Serb forces inside Kosovo, NATO says it's identified 3 sites where refugee testimonies point to the existence of mass graves. Let's have a look at where they are. Now, the sites identified by NATO are the Drenica region, the town of Malisevo and Pagrusa Valley. There's no verification so far of these reports. Now, with me is the Kosovo-Albanian journalist Geracina Tuhina, who left Pristina on Friday. She'd been writing to the Institute for War and Peace, reporting. Welcome to the world today. You saw those reports of mass graves. Are people unaccounted for in these areas?
Well, what I can say for sure is in Pagrusa Valley, for months and months there have been living refugees on the open. We can count a couple of thousands of them, maybe, probably more. Drenica as well used to be one of the traditional strongholds of KLA, but they are full of civilians, displaced persons who still live on the open, and the same thing happened in Malisevo. This is not the first time that there are claims about a possible existence of mass graves, but this is the first time that it is being claimed by the highest officials. During last summer's offensive in July, there was a big offensive of Serb forces in town Rahovec, or Rahovac, like they called it, and a couple of hundred persons got killed just only within 2 days. There were claims about existence of mass graves. It wasn't been proved until today, but 800 persons are still missing.
Well, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea has already been quoted as saying NATO is deeply preoccupied by reports of atrocities being committed against civilians. Do you fear that atrocities are being carried out?
Of course, we have a bitter experience for a year now. We have been witnessing the atrocities, the mass killings, and whenever there are mass killings, there must have been mass graves.
Do you have any hard evidence, or is evidence coming out of Kosovo of atrocities?
And for the time being, there are reports. I'm far away now from Pristina, but there are reports that atrocities are going on, but as for now, on the villages. There are no such information that something's happening within towns, even though, except Pristina, that has become a town of ghosts. It's almost empty. Towns like Peja, Jakova, and Podujev almost doesn't exist. They exist only on geographic map. They are abandoned, destroyed, and burned.
Are there any sources of Kosovo-Albanian information left inside Kosovo?
No, unfortunately not. After the foreign journalists were kicked out from Kosovo, the Serb local journalists were advised not to work and Albanians were chased. Everybody lived more or less illegally.
Now, there's also been rumours about the whereabouts of Ibrahim Rugova. What is your information about that?
Well, obviously, Ibrahim Rugova is in Pristina as for now, and he's under police custody. There are some hard evidences that he is on their hands together with his family, wife and 3 kids.
Finally, Jaracina, can we talk about the KLA and the level of resistance there is to the Serbs at the moment in the KLA? What is your information?
I don't have such an information about the KLA. I know that fightings have been going on, especially in Drenica and around mountain Chichavica, that connects all the regions that used to be under control of KLA. And the problem is that there were at least 6,000 refugees living in the open around this mountain that have been gathered from the various parts. The highest intensity was going on that part of Kosovo. I don't know, I don't have information about the casualties. This is a problem. Nobody knows what exactly happens inside Kosovo.
Jaracina Tahina, many thanks.
The teeming, squalid camp on the Macedonian border was emptied of its inhabitants. Herded onto hundreds of buses, tens of thousands of refugees were spirited away. Families separated, parents split up from their children. Western governments have sharply criticised this sudden operation by the Macedonian authorities, and international aid agencies say their work in reuniting families separated in the flight from Kosovo has become even more of a struggle. 6,000 refugees reappeared here at a sports stadium in Albania. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says more were located further inland in Macedonia, but says 10,000 are still unaccounted for. Aid workers had been concerned about the filth and squalor at the camp these refugees had come from, worried about the spread of disease, but they've been harshly critical of the Macedonian authorities' hectic evacuation. The camp at Blace itself is a ghost town now, the belongings abandoned by the refugees, evidence of their hasty departure. And more worrying still for many of them, the queue of refugees waiting to escape from has also apparently vanished.
Well, more now on a possible initiative from Moscow. Our correspondent there.
Been allowed into the Kosovan capital, Pristina, to see the damage caused by heavy NATO bombing. Overnight, NATO missiles have hit an army headquarters in the centre of Belgrade, the second time the bombs have been targeted at the heart of the city.
NATO's Secretary-General says President Milosevic could be planning to use the refugees remaining in Kosovo as human shields. Javier Solana said it would be to deter more concentrated Allied attacks on ground forces. One of Sky's correspondents in Albania says he's seen more villages on fire across the border in Kosovo this morning.
President Yeltsin says Russia is working on new proposals to try to halt NATO's bombing. He's called for an urgent meeting of world leaders to discuss the crisis.
We have a series of reports from the refugee camps and from inside Yugoslavia itself. Our diplomatic correspondent Tim Marshall, who's in Belgrade, has been to see the damage inflicted by the bombing of the Kosovo capital, Pristina.
From here they fled, and to here they must return. If not, what was it for? NATO's air raids have reduced large parts of the city centre to ruins. The telecommunications and post office building is rubble. So are many civilian buildings, including a shopping street. The city bank caught much of the blast. 9 civilians were allegedly killed in the raid so far, 15 injured. Most of the city centre is in ruins. You can't just see the destruction, you can smell it. The smoke on the horizon is from a burning fuel dump hit overnight. And between here and there, it's a ghost town. This was a town of 280,000 people. We're told that half have gone, either because of the airstrikes or at the point of a gun. We couldn't tell. The rest allegedly are in the shelters. Soldiers and police populate the town day and night now. A handful of civilians are on the streets, a few armed, some with guns, others only with their anger and tears. Perhaps this damage can never be repaired.
You're all idiots! All your people! For your nation! Tell your people!
Another blow. The city cemetery took a direct hit, possibly aimed at a nearby train track. Dozens of graves damaged, 5 or 6 utterly obliterated. The Kosovan regional governor showed us the remains of his government building. This, he said, was where the NATO politicians used to come for meetings. Never again. Some civilians were clearing up. They'll probably have to do it again. This cafe was next to what was a street of artisans.
In Pristina is now finished. This was the pride of Pristina. There you had the shops of Serbs, Albanians, Turks. All of the people, the shop owner here, all of them spoke 3 languages. And none of them was nationalist. And this, as you can clearly see, is a barbarian act, nothing else.
Pristina is the regional headquarters for where the Serbian operation against the KLA was launched. With all its terrible repercussions, those repercussions have come full circle. If the refugees can ever return home, they'll come back to a smashed city. The war is costing a fortune, and rebuilding during the peace will be the same.
Diplomatic representative of the self-styled Kosovan government. Is that the correct title, first?
That's correct.
The diplomatic representative. Are you still a member of the KLA?
Yeah, I'm a member still of KLA, but since the new government was formed in accordance with the Rambouillet Accord, where the 3 main political and military forces in Kosovo has signed an agreement to form a coalition government until the new free election will be held in Kosovo, so until the conditions for free election will be created in Kosovo.
So as far as you're concerned, the deal struck at Rambouillet is still alive?
Yeah, until the NATO and the contact group is fighting to put back on track Serbian side for this agreement we will accept as is still alive. It's up to contact group to declare nil.
Okay, can I just put something to you? This we've just received from Budapest, unconfirmed as yet. According to the Russian Duma speaker, well, the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic and the Kosovo Albanian leader Ibrahim Rugova have agreed to draw up a plan to establish an interim government for Kosovo.
Mr. Rugova is a prisoner of war. Everything what he will state or will sign is not available for Albanians. Albanians has their own government based on the signature of Mr. Rugova, Mr. Chosa, and Mr. Faci in Rambouillet under the protection of the contact group. Mr. Rugova doesn't have any power to sign in name of Albanians in Kosovo now.
Because yesterday the KLA were telling us that Rambouillet is dead now. The deal's done.
Now, I said again that it's up to contact group to declare nil. As situation is developing at the moment with all this ethnic cleansing, all these massacres, as a final solution, I think will be something out of what was viewed in the Rambouillet Accord.
Okay, on the line from Belgrade.
They have shelter and food, but no one, it seems, can provide what these people want most, all their loved ones around them. Everyone here is searching for someone. Wives have been separated from husbands, brothers from sisters, and in the most tragic cases, children from their parents. Yehona Aliu is just one of them, 5 years old and completely alone. She was separated from her parents 6 days ago as the family fled from Kosovo.
She says that she's been in another place, then she's got lost. She couldn't find her parents at all.
Does she miss her mother?
Yehona, a po të mungon mami shumë? Shumë. A I mërzit? She said, yeah, I miss her very much and I feel very, very sad when I'm not with her.
Yehona's bravery has stunned the British soldiers who are now taking care of her at a NATO camp.
There's been other children that have been lost for 2 or 3 hours. They've lost the parents on here, and she's been telling them that it's going to be all right, and she's explained that that she's lost her mummy for 6 days, and she's not crying. She's trying to stop them crying. She's had them dancing and singing. it's quite amazing, really.
She was comforting 7-year-old Gent, but he was lucky. His mother was in the same camp and was able to track him down. Many refugees here claim the Macedonian authorities deliberately separated families as they crossed the border from Kosovo. What is clear is that they made very little effort to keep them together. Those who've lost children have to tour the aid agencies, giving their names in the hope that someone has seen them.
Lost her child, 1.5 years old, and she doesn't know where exactly he is. And I said, if we are going to find him, we are going to put it in the stamp. Then she will come after 1 hour to look, is there something new about the child?
Some may never be traced. Refugees are now scattered across this region. There are no records of where they've been sent. So for now, Johanna will sit and draw pictures with the soldiers who've had to take the place of her parents. They may not believe it, but they have to tell her that one day her mother will come for her. Emma Hurd, Sky News, Stankovic, Macedonia.
And Emma joins us now live from...
Stories of violence on the part of the Serbs. Some have witnessed massacres, others have lost relatives and they're now feared dead at the hands of the Serbs. So clearly these people have been pushed out. They didn't want to come to Macedonia particularly, they didn't want to leave their homes. They've certainly had no kind of welcome here, but it is better than being back in Kosovo. What their fear now is that if people have been pushed back across the border back into Kosovo, what will become of them now? These people here are relatively safe. They may not have much comfort, they may have lost members of their family, but they are safe from the Serbs. Those back in Kosovo are not.
Emma, there has been a lot of criticism of the Macedonian...
Appleyard has been to the border between Albania and Kosovo and seen houses burning on the Kosovo side. He's now back at the refugee camp at Kukës and he joins us live. Ross, describe to us, if you will, what you saw on the border.
Well, what we did was we went up into the mountains, very high up into the mountains, so we could look into Kosovo itself. It's the first time we've been able to do that. And what we saw was a very eerie sight. Houses that have been burned out and little villages right next to the border and houses that are still on fire. Now, if you look at the border itself and perhaps take a look into Kosovo itself, there was 24 kilometers of traffic on that road. Tractors, all sorts of vehicles, people desperately trying to get into Albania. Just a couple of days ago, they closed the border.